Good morning, all fourth semester B.Ed students. This is Education 18 paper, that is Gender, School and Society. So let me discuss about the concept of adult education today. So what do you mean by adult education, especially in India? And let me discuss about the concept of introduction of adult education. The concept of adult education varies from country to country, especially the concept of adult education in India has changed over a period of time. Broadly speaking, in the pre-independence era, it mainly focused on three R's, that is reading, writing and arithmetical. After independence, maybe the concept of adult education changed from basic literacy to lifelong learning. So let us see in detail how the concept of adult education in India has evolved. So to understand the evolution of concept of adult education, especially in India, one needs to know these are the following phases. So actually I have here five phases. The very five phases names are concept of basic literacy, that is maybe from 1880 to 1947, where the second is concept of social education, that is 1948 to 64. The third one is called concept of fundamental and functional literacy, that is 1965 to 77. And the fourth one is called the concept of developmental literacy, that is 1978 to 2008, where the last and the fifth one is called concept of lifelong learning, that is 2009 onwards till today. So what actually the concept of basic literacy tells about? So this was a pre-independence era, and maybe British were rulers. The basic, the concept of this, and even the basis of the evaluation of the concept of the same basic literacy was expansion of night schools. So the curriculum of basic literacy included skill of reading, writing, and arithmetic. So duration of this program was for 2 years, and even separate curriculum was spreaded, especially for adult education purpose. So apart from the impacting, especially for this view, and from imparting skills in 3 R's, that is reading, writing, and arithmetic. So the curriculum also included stories of what do you call that? Historical importance, lessons giving, information on health, hygiene, and the first aid. So the implementation of the same is the duration of the same actual teaching was 100 schools days in a year. Classes were held in the evenings, usually between 7 to 10 p.m. That is in between evening in the 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Alphabetical method was used for teaching adults. Adults were first introduced to all alphabets, followed by preparation of words and even then making a full meaning sentence. So it was really a challenge for both the learner as well as the instructor, or you may be called as a teacher, to learn or something to teach meaningless alphabet. So that was the most of the states who implemented this program did not conduct examination except in Punjab. In Punjab, just called very terminal examination were conducted, and but it was a voluntary. So learner who appeared for examination and completed successfully, so were awarded certificates. So this is what actually I have information in my hand now. So this actually the concept basic literacy remained as the same throughout the British period. In 19th and 20th century, a variety of attempts by national leaders, social reformers, etc. were made to educate illiterate people. For example, Keshubai Chandra Sen, the great champion of mass education, and even Devendranath Tagore, an eminent just intellectual, set up a society namely called as Sanghat Sabha in 1859. Try to understand, they both framed a society named called as Sanghat Sabha in 1815. Especially it's a very interested under the consideration of Devendranath Tagore. And very the Sangat means together and Sabha means meeting. The objective behind this the objective behind it. This is what do you call that? Especially for the view, the behind of the same establishment of the Sangat Sabha. So first people will come together and even discuss on current social problems and spiritual things. In 19th century, the Brahmo Samaja in Bengal took leadership to educate illiterate women. Because we have to understand the same name, Brahmo Samaja, actually the very greatest reformed society. And it is noteworthy to mention here ideas of Swami Vivekananda in the 19th century on adult education. He strongly believed that education should be given in a vernacular language. So according to him, education should be build life of a person. And so in early period of 20th century, so social reformers through their organization organized a number of literacy classes to educate masses to sustain literacy, and even libraries were also set up. This is what I mean to say that. And the next one is called, the second one, concept of social education, that is called 1948 to 64. The concept of social education was conceived in 1948, and actually it is in 1952 it was integrated with a community development program. It's called CDP, Community Development Program. So initially the concept was not clear. In 1963 a committee was appointed under the chairmanship of Mohan Sinha Mehta. So this committee developed the concept of social education. It emphasized more on social aspects, and even literacy was part of it. The very background of the same, this concept of social education is, after independence, India adopted a welfare approach for development, and this required structural reforms in various fields. So the very successful implementation of the mass literacy campaign in a very pre-independence period, that is called 1938 to 47. So had already awakened in the masses. This also became a very ground of needs to formulate the separate policy for education, especially for adult education. So at the time of independence, India had a literacy rate actually was 12.2%. In earlier programs which were implemented in pre-independence era. So the concept of adult education was too narrow. So in post-independence, it was decided to widen this concept. Thus, health, hygiene, recreation, upgradation of vocational skills, improvements in social, cultural, and even economic life, and citizenship education were included in the concept and even termed as a social education. It is because the Datta 1986 that performed. And as the mentioned in first 5-year plan, social education was comprehensive program of community, very upliftment through community action, and some of the objectives of social education were implemented. So the definition of social education, what does it actually mean by you social education? A committee of 7 eminent educationists of India under the chairmanship of Mohanlal Saxena conceptualized social education. That defined the social education as a course of study directed towards the production of consciousness of citizenship among the people and promotion of social solidarity among them. Try to understand once again, I shall be part of that. The definition of the social education means a course of study just directed towards the production of consciousness of citizenship among the people and even the promotion of social solidarity among them. So the curriculum of social education included lessons like health, hygiene, family, community living, occasions, literacy, what do you mean by that, cultural activities, and recreational activities. Recreational means, once again, you're just making not a recreating. Recreational sense like very satisfactory activities like enjoyment. So with the same thing we adopted And the period now actually coming over here is the concept of functional literacy, that is called 1965 to 77. This is the era where actually the government and even the policy makers realized that the very mere reading, writing, arithmetic skills are not sufficient and one need to go beyond that, because by this time they felt that it was neat, and they considered that it was sufficient. But after the same this after 1965 to 77, one need not to go beyond that, and thus this concept very functional literacy emerged during in 1960s, because of that one should understand that it was not sufficient, the concept is not sufficient, and because skills are not sufficient. There where the functional literacy was defined as the literacy integrated with the occupation of the learner and the directly related to the development. So the functional literacy was translated into a very action in 1968, and it was based on work oriented literacy. Mind it was based on work oriented literacy. So the very background of the same concept of the very functional literacy 1965 to 77 is a series of international and national meetings, conferences took place during 1950s. The first World Conference on Educational, especially educational concept of adult, that means adult education, organized by the UNESCO in Denmark in 1949. So discussed the role of adult education in the development of society, while just called your polity and even economy. That means it focused on the functional just called very perspective of adult education prominently. William Gray in 1956 he defined that the functional literacy as a person functionally literate when he was, and even the skills reading writing which enabled him to engage in all those activities in which literacy is normally assumed in his cultural group. This definition was accepted by almost all the countries including India. So the second World Conference on Education, especially adult education, was held in Canada in 1960. It also emphasized on the linkage in adult education and even productivity, work under development. So this was followed by the World Conference of Education, Minister of Eradication of Illiteracy in Tehran in 1965. The next concept is called the concept of functional literacy 1965 to 77. So the literacy, especially, this means and not an end. Its purpose is to impact, especially, and export the skills. And the main purpose is to impart such knowledge which makes a person occupationally more efficient than before. Earlier time it was just on the sake of knowledge, but now it reached as occupationally, and it was realized that the mere ability just called to read and even write is not sufficient for overall development for a specially person as well as the nation. Hence actually it was decided to integrate literacy with learners, occupation, even some production. So literacy was focused on increasing the functional efficiency of the person. So the very definition of this is functional literacy means literacy integrated with the occupation of the learner which is directly related to the development. So implementation strategy was during 1968 to 78. That means the foremost training functional literacy project, that's called FTFLP. That means once again the very long form of FTFLP, foremost training and functional literacy project, was implemented. The target group was farmers. To increase the agriculture productions, the government of India decided to train the farmers. This project has three components, namely farmers training, functional literacy, and even farm broadcasting. That means to enable the farmers to read and understand the labels of the fertilizer bags. If they will be literate, just literate, then they can read the bags which what they purchase under the agriculture concept and basement, the very fertilizer bags. See, fill up loan application forms, input cards in banks, keep simple accounts and operate them, and read, make use of simple extension bulletins, rural newspapers, etc. And the concept of the very development literacy in 1978 to 2008. So early 1970s was the era of Paulo Freire, just called philosophy consciously. It has a great influence on education, on adult. So he emphasized on what do you call that, critical thinking, and even actions were leads to change. But he believed that in active participation, learner in learning progress, especially according to him, instructions of adult education classes should become instrument to carry the discussion, just called learners can learn themselves, not depending on others. And so with this philosophy, the horizons of functionality widened, and the concept of development literacy evolved during this period. So the same thing during this transition period, National Adult Educational Program was conceived in India, that is called NAEP. The long form of NAEP is National Adult Education Just Program. So what do you mean by National Adult Educational Program? On 2nd October 1978, Government of India announced that National Adult Educational Program. This was the first adult education program implemented by the Government of India, especially throughout the country, and actually implementation of literacy classes started in the year of 1979. Very objective of this program were literacy, awareness and functionality. So it was a center-based approach, so where 30 learners were taught by one instructor. Age group of adult literates was 15 to 35 years. Initially, the duration of the program was 10 months, 300 to 500 hours, which was extended to 3 years. So later again, it was reduced to 2 years. So during the first year, the program basic literacy was given for 300 to 500 hours. So in this period, the basic literacy skills were given to learners. In addition to that, other awareness components such as information on health, family life and even vocational education were also included in this curriculum. And now the question is the concept which I am telling you is the last concept of lifelong learnings, 2009 onwards. Globalization has entered in all walks of life. It has brought world more closely than ever before. It has created more opportunities as well as many challenges. Realizing the very new challenges of globalized world and even importance of the functional literacy in it, because the Government of India launched the Samskara Bharata mission. Try to understand Samskara Bharata mission, that is called the very great concept, and later on this it becomes Sakar, that's called. So reduced of this number of non-literate adults in India and the poster an environment within the communities that encouraging lifelong learning. So the background of this is implementation of TLC and PLP, so very increased. Literacy rate from 65% in 2001 and it is to 74 to 0. In 2011 census it becomes 74. So this means a district which had adult female literacy rate 50% or below as per 2001 census are selected the very implementation of the this program. In addition, those districts which are affected by left wing extremism. That means this program is based upon a wider content. It also recognizes the very virtue of continuing education. So in this technology driven world, knowledge is constantly changing. One needs to update oneself. So the main feature of this is it is different than earlier programs in many aspects. The curriculum included core content, that's called CC, based on the broad national curriculum framework for especially adult education. So the locally relevant content, that's called LRC, which are produced in locally dominant languages. So the implementation of this is the very Loka Shiksha Kendras and adult education centers, I'm telling, are the very operational arm of this program, a very responsible organization, and even deliver the classes. So with this, the very continuation of this education program also ensuring the overall aim to create learning society is fulfilled, and just a wide range of continuing educational programs are also organized. So with this, I concluded this lesson about adult education. Once again, I'll be there for you with a very new concept. Have a nice time. Take care of yourself. This is Professor K. Bhiri.